European Union leaders have been joined by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy for crisis talks aimed at boosting Europe's defence spending and shoring up support for Ukraine. The meeting in Brussels comes just days after the US paused military aid and intelligence sharing with Kyiv. European nations are under pressure following the Trump administration's decision to distance the United States from European security. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said European leaders are considering a plan to rearm Europe.
We are determined to invest more, to invest better, and to invest faster together. From Paris to London to Brussels, we have shown that we are willing and able to step up our joint efforts and to coordinate effectively. Fact is that Europe is facing a clear and present danger. And this is why I presented the Rearm Europe plan today to the leaders, a plan to give Europe the military capability that it needs to face today's threats. It could mobilize up to 800 billion euros, and it is about taking more responsible on our shoulders for our own security because the urgency is real.
Our very own Parrock is at the summit. Tell us more about what's come out of this meeting.
Well, essentially what we saw is this plan that Ursula von der Leyen put forward at the end earlier this week, called Rearm Europe, has essentially been approved. Now, the details are still a little bit vague, but this idea of raising 800 billion euros, 150 billion euros of it through EU's loans that the European Union institutions will take on, and the rest through sort of earmarking different funds, moving the money around, allowing countries to support their industries, leaving debt caps, etc., in different ways. That appears to be approved. How it all really works out when it comes to it, we'll have to wait to be seen. But the leaders, all 27 of them, approved this Rearm Europe plan going forward. Now what happens is the institutions here in Brussels, they look into how they can operationalise this plan. The idea being that EU countries, instead of purchasing all of them buying exactly the same technology, all of the same military equipment, they can pool together, either buy it together or procure it together and use one another's. The idea is to make this more efficient, to make it quicker, and really for Europe to try and stand on its own 2 feet after Trump has pulled his support out of Ukraine and therefore sort of subsequently out of Europe.
Jack, the way you frame it, it sounds like Europe is very united in its support for Ukraine. Is that the case?
No, as far as support for Ukraine, actually not. There was another discussion point here at the summit which was about Ukraine and the continued support for Ukraine, and 26 of the EU's 27 countries agreed to it. One of them, you probably might have guessed it already, Hungary, didn't agree, and that's because Viktor Orban is pro-Russia and is in line with Trump. And essentially what was interesting about this summit, from what we've seen, is they didn't even really bother to try and get him on board with this. They've essentially put an asterisk in the document, signed it off as 26, used a special clause that they can in the EU, and just moved on. Ordinarily, they used to have massive fights about this. Now they've moved on. But the rest of them appear to be united in their support of Ukraine's defence against the Russian invasion. OK, so we can now expect concrete steps to be taken as far as expanding European support for Ukraine? Well, what's interesting with this is this summit's really been about Europe's own defence, but some of that will trickle down into supporting Ukraine, because the more they procure weapons, the more they'll be able to give to Ukraine should they want to. We had Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian president, here today. He won't have really got that much out of what he wanted, apart from the big strong show of support, and that's what he needs at the moment after that chaotic meeting in the Oval Office with the Vice President and the President of the United States. There is one other important issue that's been going on here at the summit today. French President Emmanuel Macron riled the Russians up by saying that French nuclear weapons could be used to protect other European countries, that he could sort of put forward a protective shield. The Russians said that that would be seen as a direct sign of aggression, a threat to them. But we heard from Emmanuel Macron, the French president, after this summit. He said that he had discussions with other EU leaders and that some of them were very much interested in that proposal.
Very interesting. Times DW's Jack Parrock, thank you. Well, as Ukraine's president shores up European support, there have been new Russian attacks on his country. Officials in the port city of Odessa say a new massive drone strike has damaged energy infrastructure. And early on Thursday, a hotel in Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown of Kyiv was hit by a Russian missile, killing at least 4 people and hospitalizing dozens more. Ukrainian officials say US citizens were among those in the hotel when it was struck. Well, Trump says he will soon make a decision on whether to revoke the legal status of almost 250,000 Ukrainians who fled the war to the United States. Trump made the statement as he signed another round of executive orders in the White House. He also announced he will travel to Saudi Arabia on the first foreign trip of his presidency. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy will travel there next week to hold talks with US officials on ending the war with Russia. DW's Benjamin Álvarez Gruber joins us from Washington. The US announcing talks next week on a peace framework for Ukraine and Saudi Arabia. What details are there so far?
That's right. Both delegations, Ukraine and the US, have confirmed that they will hold talks in Saudi Arabia. Ukrainian President Zelenskyy has said that he would travel to that country on Monday. And what we've been hearing here from the White House and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, this meeting could take place either in Riyadh or in Jeddah. Both sides are still coordinating details, so the conversations will happen in the same country where representatives from the White House met their counterparts from Russia. We all probably remember those pictures, and the signing of this mineral deal between Ukraine and the US is still in the air. It's not clear what promises Washington made to Kyiv, for example, on what will happen with weapons deliveries or intelligence sharing, if they would actually be resumed once there is a deal. So that was supposed to be signed last Friday, of course, with President Zelenskyy's visit to DC here, so we might also have some more information after this meeting between the US and between the Ukrainian delegation in Saudi Arabia.
And what about the status of all the Ukrainians who fled to the US?
There have been several rumors. Today there was a report by Reuters. President Trump was asked on that when he signed several executive orders today on a decision on whether he would revoke the temporary legal status for around 240,000 Ukrainians that left their country following the Russian invasion and the war. And he said that his administration is still planning to take that step. There's no information yet, but the press secretary of the White House, Karen Leavitt, pushed back on these reports, saying that no decisions have been made. But if the White House actually goes through with them, that move would be a stunning reversal of the welcome Ukrainians that were received under President Joe Biden's administration and potentially put them on a fast track to deportation.
It's one piece of bad news after the next for Ukraine and Ukrainians. Benjamin, thank you very much for your analysis from Washington.